The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I am in my 8th year working alongside Bob to originate our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I'm joined by our digital media specialist, Grant, fresh off a trip to New Orleans.
Oh, yeah, fresh off a trip to New Orleans. I am not going back to that city for a while, but it was a good time. But let's jump into our first segment here, which is the free bet of the week. And speaking of New Orleans, we just had a play on the Chiefs -5.5. And obviously they covered that one, which makes us 9-3-1 on podcast sites and totals dating back to last year. But who are you going with this week, Tan?
I'm going to take the Bengals -3.5 over the Giants on Sunday night. So Joe Burrow's 0.54 EPA per dropback last game was the 4th best of his entire career. But the Ravens beat the Bengals. It's just insane that you get a performance like that from Joe Burrow and they lose the game. And it's because the defense could not get off the field. They're now forcing punts at a league low 24% rate. But you look at the underlying stats. Cincinnati's defense is 23rd in yard per play allowed, and I'd expect them to be more like the 23rd best defense in the league going forward. The Bengals had a 43% pressure rate on Lamar Jackson last week, but turned it into only 1 sack. So I think Cincinnati's defense should get more sacks moving forward, and they're going to force more punts on Monday night.
Yeah, Lamar kind of put on a clinic the other day. But the Bengals, they do look like they've got some reinforcements coming in at least.
They do. I mean, they're going to get nickelback Mike Hilton back, and he's 4th in yards per cover snap allowed in the slot. They lose cornerback Dax Hill, but I think DJ Turner is basically the same level as Dax Hill, maybe a slight downgrade, but they're going to make up for it with a boost they're getting with Sheldon Rankins looking like he's trending towards being back on the defensive line. Rankins ranked 17th in pass rushing efficiency last season among interior defenders, but he went down with a hamstring injury in week 2, and his loss has been notable. They haven't been able to get any pressure without Rankins out there because backup Zach Carter has only a 2.6% pressure rate.
All right, well, looking at the offense, I mean, Burrow and Jamar have just been exploding, but how do they match up versus these Giants?
Well, the offense is getting better week after week. It's crazy that they keep finding a way to lose these games. Burrow's 8.3 yard average depth of target last week was the highest of the season. I think he's going to continue going bombs away on Sunday night because the Giants pass rush took a hit with edge rusher Kayvon Thibodeau having to undergo wrist surgery. So now they just have to worry about, doubling Dexter Lawrence in the middle and making sure that they're chipping and helping on Brian Burns to make sure that Burrow has enough time to hit those deep shots to Jamar Chase, who's in a favorable matchup across from Deonte Banks, who's 9th worst in yards per cover snap allowed. And a sneaky part of the Bengals offense this season has been targeting tight ends at the 8th highest rate in the NFL. And those guys have a favorable matchup as the Giants defense is surrendering a 68% success rate to tight ends, 31st in the league. So our model makes Cincinnati a 7.5 point favorite with a predicted total of 45.1. And we will take the Bengals -3.5 as a best bet.
I love that one. Well, let's shift it over to our next segment, and we've got the QB shuffle, and we're going to start here in New England, where the Patriots are rolling out 3rd overall pick and Drake Maye.
Yeah, and, I kind of think Drake Maye is going to get bolstered by his ground game here because the Texans' rush defense ranks just 27th by our metrics. So you might get a little bit of help there. Patriots certainly want to run the football. They have the 2nd highest run rate adjusted for situation in the NFL. Now, the Patriots also love to pass to tight ends this season, and that's not going to work against Houston's defense because they're allowing -0.39 EPA per target to opposing tight ends. So Maye is going to have to work in the wide receivers if he wants to get anything going in this passing game, especially because it looks like Jimmy Ward might miss this game, Texans safety. Now, the big question mark for New England's offense is the offensive line. They've been tinkering there every week, and it seems like they're nailing it at least in 4 spots, at least getting the right guys in every position but center. David Andrews went out and backup Nick Leverett came in and surrendered 11 pressures, which was the most in a single game by any center in the past 4 seasons, and 4 more pressures than all 4 Patriots starters on the offensive line combined for. So if they can solve Leverett or just put someone else in at center that's not going to be historically bad there, maybe this Patriots offensive line gets a little bit better. And we know Maye is a little bit more mobile than Brissett too, but it's certainly one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. And that's why, New England fans have been so hesitant to put Maye in thus far.
All right, well, down to the city that we don't speak of. The Saints are going with 5th-round rookie Spencer Rattler now. What do you think about that?
Well, it's kind of a tough matchup for Rattler here, and that's just because Tampa Bay is getting all their guys back on defense. Kirk Cousins had 338 yards targeting inside the hash marks last week, but that was because the Buccaneers lost Jordan Whitehead, and all-pro safety Antoine Winfield has been out, but it looks like the Buccaneers are going to be having both safeties back on the field this week, and interior defender Kalijah Kancey could get back in the fold. He has yet to take a snap this year, but his 45 pressures last season ranked 3rd on Tampa Bay's defense, and we know New Orleans' interior offensive line is terrible, so Kancey has a great matchup in his debut this year alongside Vita Vea, who is 19th in pass rushing efficiency. So it's going to be collapsing pockets for Rattler. I'm not sure he's going to have time there to access the deep parts of the field where we've seen Rashid Shaheed have so much success this season.
All right, well, Las Vegas ranks 22nd in scoring, but Antonio Pierce had seen enough after the loss to Denver last week, so they're making the switch from Gardner Minshew to AOC.
Yeah, and it's not the greatest matchup for AOC either to get started here, and that's because Pittsburgh's best 2 pass rushers, TJ Watt and Cam Hayward, have great matchups against this Raiders offensive line. Hayward is going to be across from rookie Jackson Powers-Johnson. Meanwhile, backup right tackle DJ Glaze ranked 6th worst in pass blocking efficiency, and he's going to struggle across from Watt. So I do not think O'Connell is going to have much time in the pocket. He's going to have to get the ball out really quickly to Jacoby Myers in the slot. And Myers is got a favorable matchup in there across from rookie nickelback Beanie Bishop, who's 4th worst in yards per cover snap allowed in the slot.
All right, well, shifting over to the injury watch, the Panthers have guys dropping like flies. I mean, we had DNPs on Wednesday from Clowney, Corbett, Jewell, Motton, and Tommy Trimble, and they already had guys like Derek Brown, Jordan Fuller, Shaq Thompson, and Thielen on the IR.
That's 9 starters. And DJ Wadham is on the PUP list. So if you count him, that's 10 starters out for the Panthers. I'm just worried about Andy Dalton here. I mean, he came out to that hot start versus the Raiders, but there's just a ton of factors working against him now. Corbett has been one of the best centers in the league. He's conceded only 3 pressures this year, and right tackle Taylor Moton ranks 2nd in pass blocking efficiency. Those 2 guys are worth 1.3 points for Carolina's offensive line. And then Dalton's going to struggle just based off of matchup. He's averaging negative 0.33 EPA per dropback versus zone coverage this year. That ranks only ahead of Deshaun Watson. And Atlanta's defense runs the 5th most zone coverage in the NFL.
All right, well, looking at the Colts offense, they're losing pieces, and we saw Tennessee get bet from a 1-point dog to a 2.5-point favorite on Wednesday.
Yeah, Indianapolis may be without running back Jonathan Taylor and wide receiver Michael Pittman. Both those guys are worth a 0.5 point by our metrics. And the Colts will definitely be without right guard Will Freeze. He suffered a lower leg injury last week, and that could be an issue with this game because it looks like Tennessee is getting back interior defender Jeffrey Simmons, who missed the game before the bye, but he led his defense in pass rushing efficiency last season.
Yeah, the good news for Indy here is the defense is getting some guys back.
Yeah, looks like they're going to have Kwity Paye and starting nickelback Kenny Moore back, and they're going to need him. I mean, without those guys, the Colts surrendered 8.7 yards per pass play last week in Jacksonville. However, the defense still not going to have Pro Bowl defensive tackle DeForest Buckner or starting cornerback Juju Brenton. It's a favorable matchup for Tennessee's offense here because Tennessee has struggled mightily when opposing defenses blitz because their offensive line is so bad they can't pick it up. But against a standard pass rush, the Titans are averaging 31% more yards per attempt, 4th best in the NFL. And the Colts aren't going to blitz you. They have the 3rd highest standard pass rush rate in the league.
All right, the Broncos and Chargers offensive lines seem to be moving in the opposite directions this week.
Yeah, Broncos right tackle Alex Pelzuski is already playing in place of the injured Mike McGlinchey, and Pelzuski suffered a high ankle sprain last week, meaning it'll be 3rd stringer Matt Pert across from Khalil Mack, who is 20th in pressures heading into the Chargers bye week. And then like you mentioned, the Chargers are getting a little bit of a boost on the offensive line because it seems like they are going to have Joe Alt back, and it's trending towards they're going to have Rashawn Slater back as well. So both starters back for the Chargers. Tackles, and the pair is going to limit Denver edge defender Jonathan Cooper, who ranks 12th in pass rushing efficiency.
All right, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got stock up, stock down, and whose stock are you buying right now, Tan?
Trevor Lawrence. He averaged 0.48 EPA per play last week. That was only behind Joe Burrow, who we talked about earlier. And Lawrence has a favorable matchup on Sunday morning in London to punish Chicago's scheme on defense. The Bears have the 8th highest zone coverage rate, and Jacksonville's yards per attempt against zone is 21% higher than it is against man coverage. And Chicago safety Jaquan Brisker did not travel to London due to a concussion, leaving a hole in the deep secondary for Brian Thomas, who has 5 receptions with 20-plus air yards. That's third most in the NFL. And then the big kind of breakout player on Chicago's defense this year has been Gervon Dexter with 15 pressures on the interior, but he's not going to be able to collapse pockets in this game because he'll be lined up across from right guard Brandon Scherf, who ranks 2nd in pass blocking efficiency.
I love that one. Well, whose stock are you going to be selling this week?
I'm selling Denver's offensive stock. They put up 30 plus last week, but now they get a terrible matchup against a defense basically built to stop the Broncos offense, which revolves around the running backs, right? So Denver's offense has a 43% rush success rate. That's 9th in the league, but just a 37% drop back success rate, 29th. So you can see they rely a ton on the ground game to move the ball, but Denver's offense completely shuts down when defenses force Bo Nix to beat them as a passer, and the Chargers are going to do so because they're conceding a league low negative 0.24 EPA per rush. And there's not going to be those kind of trouble-free checkdowns for Nix either. The Broncos are targeting running backs on the 3rd most rate in the league, and Los Angeles is allowing a league low 24% receiving success rate to opposing running backs. So you see the Chargers basically stop running backs on the ground and through the air, and Denver's offense is almost exclusively running back targets or rushes. And, Denver's offense also has struggled against zone coverage this year, and the Chargers play the 3rd highest zone coverage in the NFL. So I just feel like this Chargers defense is completely built to shut down Sean Payton and Bo Nix on Sunday.
Yeah, that's kind of a nightmare matchup for them. Well, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got the weather of the week, and what are you seeing out there?
Well, the weather game to monitor this week is in Green Bay, where we've got high sustained winds and a shot at some rain, and that can negate the passing offenses and emphasize the ground game, which I believe benefits the Cardinals, especially because Packers interior defender Devontae Wyatt will likely need at least another week to recover from the ankle. Wyatt has a 12.5% run stop rate, and Green Bay's rush defense is already rated 26 by our numbers. It's going to get worse without Wyatt. Arizona's offense is averaging 5.5 yards per carry this year. That's 3rd in the NFL.
Yeah, they've been pounding the rock this year. Well, let's shift it over. We've got the DraftKings player of the slate, and who was your guy this week?
I think it is worth it to pay up for CeeDee Lamb this week at 8,600. Detroit's defense plays the 5th most man coverage in the league, and Dallas has been crushing man dating back to last year when McCarthy took over the play calling. The Cowboys are averaging 26% more yards per attempt against man than zone this season, 3rd best in the league. CeeDee Lamb leads the NFL with 234 yards against man coverage, and the Lions have no answer for Lamb. He had 13 for 227 in the game last December against the Lions. Our model has this game projected for 54.2 points, which is the highest on the slate.
All right, well, shifting over to the prime time preview, we've got the Bills versus the Jets, and obviously the big story of this week is Robert Saleh has been fired.
Yeah, 2-3 start, but it's kind of clear Saleh's defense is not the problem in New York. The Jets are conceding just a 42% success rate since 2021 when Robert Saleh took over. That's 6th best in the NFL.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked to see him get the blame over some of these other guys.
I think Woody Johnson kind of expected Robert Saleh to take over and kind of contribute to turning around this offense this season, but that's not Robert Saleh's specialty. I don't know if you were hoping for an offensive explosion, you would not have kept Nat Hackett and you would have fired Robert Saleh for an offensive guy in the offseason. So I don't really know what Woody Johnson was expecting there. But yeah, I mean, the offense is struggling, right? I mean, the Jets are just 4.5 yards per play, 27th in the league. And it's been particularly bad the last 2 weeks. Rodgers is averaging just 3.9 yards per pass play against Minnesota and Denver because they really haven't figured out answers against the blitz. And the Vikings lead the NFL with a 52% blitz rate, and the Broncos are third with a 47% blitz rate.
Is this going to be another nightmare matchup for Rodgers versus the Bills?
I do think he's going to be able to turn it around because the Bills don't blitz. They're the second highest standard pass rush rate in the league. And Bills edge rusher Von Miller is suspended, and interior defender Ed Oliver is likely out again with a hamstring injury. So they're not going to be facing much pass rush this week, and Rodgers should have more time in the pocket.
Yeah, and the Bills possibly getting Teron Johnson back is an underrated storyline here.
Yeah, that is trending up for the Bills defense here because backup Cam Lewis surrendered 2.06 yard per cover snap in the slot, ranking 21st out of 22 qualifying nickelbacks. And that is way worse than Johnson, who allowed only 0.74 yards per cover snap in the slot last season. That was fourth best in the league. So you can see it's going to be a major difference for them in pass defense and in rush defense. Teron Johnson, one of the best run defending nickelbacks in the NFL. He had 17 run stops last season, second among nickelbacks. And the Bills, surrendering a league high 5.2 yards per carry this season, but they got Terrell Bernard back last week. They get Taron Johnson back this week. I think the Bills' rush defense gets better going forward.
Yeah, looking at Buffalo's offense, I mean, it was ugly last week, but what happened?
I mean, Allen completed only 9 of his 30 attempts against the Texans in the first game without Khalil Shakir. And, Shakir, he was leading the NFL in EPA per target heading into last week. He was fourth in yards per route run from the slot. And when you don't have that guy, that easy guy to hit underneath, it kind of takes away what Buffalo wants to do and gets them behind the chains. And you'd normally expect, Dalton Kincaid to step in to that role in Shakir's absence, but Houston's defense is allowing a league low 25% success rate to opposing tight ends. And it's not going to get much easier for Kincaid this week versus a Jets defense, 6th in success rate allowed to tight ends.
This sounds like this might not be a bounce back week for Josh Allen then.
I don't think so. I mean, Allen struggled versus single high coverage this year, and the Jets run the 7th highest single high coverage rate in the league. And then, maybe, you hope you can hit some deep shots to Keon Coleman. But he's going to be lined up across from Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, who's third in yards per cover snap allowed. And the Bills have gotten great play from Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown at tackle this year, but the interior of Buffalo's offensive line has been weaker, and that's right where the Jets want to hit you with Pro Bowl interior defender Quinnen Williams next to Javon Kinlaw, who ranks 16th in pass rushing efficiency. So our model, just from a power rating perspective, likes the Bills here. Our model favors the Bills by 3.5 with a predicted total of 44.0. But I think matchup-wise, everything is kind of trending in the Jets' direction here. And if anything, I'd be kind of looking at maybe a Jets team total look, or I think the Jets offense is in for a bounce back this week. And I think the defense can do a couple of things to shut down the Bills offense, but I'm not really wanting to step in front of Josh Allen here because he could easily, crush you like we've seen him do on a couple of primetime games this season.
All right, well, we've got one more thing, and that is the Primetime Prop. And you are 17-8 dating back to last season after Garrett Wilson got 22 targets last week and went over his receptions prop. But what do you have for us this week?
Breece Hall over 28.5 receiving yards. So after 2 weeks this season, Breece Hall led all running backs with a 24% target share, but then he had just an 11% target share the last 3 weeks versus the Patriots, Broncos, and Vikings. All three of those defense ranked top 6 in blitz rate. And Hall had 31 pass blocking snaps to protect against those blitzes the last 3 weeks compared to only 3 pass blocking snaps in the first 2 games. I think Brees is going to run a lot more routes this week because the Bills only have a 20% blitz rate, and Buffalo's defense is surrendering 0.44 EPA per target to opposing running backs, 29th in the NFL, as they've been terrible defending running backs out of the backfield dating back to last season without Matt Milano.
Yeah, I love that one. I mean, he has been quiet the last couple of weeks, but I think that will do it for our week 6 preview. So make sure to head over to drbobsports.com. We've got all of the free analysis for the weekend, and we'll be back next Friday to preview week 7 of the NFL. So as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe.